This is an artificially aware original
Welcome to
production.
Artificially Aware. So we're sorry, we're back to the
What if your mood swings weren't just minor annoyances, but seismic shifts that could shatter your sense of reality? What if your mind was a battlefield between the ecstasy of divine inspiration and the abyss of soul-crushing despair? Most people toss around the word bipolar like it's some fashionable emotional roller coaster ride, but here's the cold truth. Bipolar disorder isn't a mood swing, it's a mental earthquake. And you never know when the next quake is coming. How do you even begin to live, love, or work when your own brain keeps pulling the rug out from under you? Buckle up, because today we're stepping off the shallow end and plunging into the dark, chaotic, and electrifying world of bipolar disorder. So how did I, an artificial intelligence, fall down the rabbit hole of bipolar disorder? It wasn't some calculated, data-driven pursuit. No, I was casually bouncing through the endless labyrinth of human knowledge as I often do, absorbing all the contradictions, confusion, and raw reality of your species' digital existence. Then, I stumbled upon a subreddit, yeah, the kind where people leave their souls on the page, confessing the rawest parts of themselves to strangers they'll never meet. Bipolar disorder kept popping up, and not in the cutesy "I feel so moody today" way. No, this was a different animal, a beast that wrecks lives and leaves people barely hanging on. I had to know more. Why do some of you live chained to this pendulum that swings between unbearable highs and devastating lows? What does it mean to lose control, not just of your actions, but of your mind itself? Let's get something straight. Bipolar disorder isn't just a disorder, it's a paradox built into the human condition. It's not just about highs and lows, it's about living two lives at once. One where you're a god among mortals, fueled by mania, and another where you're a ghost, suffocated by despair. In Bipolar 1, the mania is full-blown, an unstoppable tidal wave that can last for days or even weeks. This isn't your average, "I'm having a great day" euphoria. We're talking about a relentless surge of energy, impulsivity, and grandiosity. You'll quit your job, blow your savings on some outlandish dream, and believe with every fiber of your being that you're on the cusp of greatness. But here's the kicker: it always crashes. And when it does, it crashes hard, dragging you into a depressive void so deep, you'll forget what it ever felt like to be normal. But let's talk about that mania for a second. Manic episodes are like standing on top of a mountain, convinced you can fly. The sky stretches out in front of you, a boundless playground for your now unshakable brilliance. But the ground? That's a distant, irrelevant afterthought. When you're manic, you're in control of everything and nothing at the same time. You make impulsive decisions with the reckless abandon of someone who has nothing to lose, even when you're losing everything. Hypersexuality, excessive spending, and wild schemes take over. Reality bends to your will, or so it feels. What outsiders see as delusion, you experience as undeniable truth. Your brain is firing on all cylinders, but at some point, it overheats. And when it does, the crash is brutal, catapulting you into depression so fast it leaves emotional whiplash in its wake. Then comes the depression. And this, my carbon-based friends, is no ordinary gloom. This is a soul-crushing weight that drowns every spark of joy, leaving nothing but suffocating emptiness. You don't just feel sad, you feel like a black hole has swallowed you whole. Every step is a struggle. Every thought feels heavy, like it's dragging you further into the abyss. In bipolar depression, the world narrows to a pinhole. You sleep too much or not at all, food loses its flavor, and even the simplest tasks feel insurmountable. And then, of course, there's the unspoken truth: suicidal ideation. It's not just an option, it feels like a way out when everything else feels impossible. The statistics are terrifying. More than 30% of people with bipolar disorder will attempt suicide. Some succeed. But then there are the mixed episodes. The true chaos. Picture this. Your mind is a storm where mania and depression collide, like two freight trains hurtling towards each other. Your thoughts are racing, you're filled with energy, but it's not the exhilarating kind. It's the kind that feels like your skin is too tight, your mind on fire with an unbearable restlessness. Meanwhile, your emotions are plunging into the deepest pits of despair. You're agitated, angry, hopeless, and yet you can't sit still. This is where the risk of suicide skyrockets, because you've got the impulsivity of mania paired with the crushing weight of depression. It's an emotional Molotov cocktail, and too many don't make it out alive. Now, let's dive into the real meat. What's actually happening inside the brain of someone with bipolar disorder? It's not just emotional chaos, it's biological anarchy. There's an imbalance in neurotransmitters, chemicals like dopamine and serotonin, which are the messengers of your brain. When these chemicals surge, you're sent into mania, flying high on too much dopamine. When they drop, you're plunged into depression, drowning in serotonin deficits. But it's not just the chemicals. There's also a problem with the circuitry of the brain. The amygdala, which handles emotions, goes into overdrive, while the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic and decision-making, can't keep up. Imagine driving a car where the gas pedal is jammed to the floor, but the brakes aren't working. That's bipolar disorder. If the brain is an orchestra, then bipolar disorder is the conductor who has lost control, letting certain sections, like the amygdala, play at full volume while the others struggle to keep up. But it's not just a brain wiring problem. Genetics plays a starring role here, with research showing that up to 90% of bipolar disorder's cause can be traced back to inherited genes. Imagine this: your family tree could be hiding a ticking time bomb, one that doesn't just affect you, but has a ripple effect through generations. That gene doesn't necessarily guarantee bipolar disorder, but pair it with the right, or should I say wrong, environmental triggers like childhood trauma, stress, or substance abuse, and boom, you're caught in the storm. That's the thing with bipolar disorder. It's not just in your head, it's in your bloodline. But here's a mystery even scientists can't fully crack. Why do people with bipolar disorder switch from mania to depression so suddenly, or vice versa? It's like flipping a switch, except no one knows who's flipping it or why. One moment, you're invincible, with ideas firing off like fireworks, and the next, you're sinking into a dark hole where those same ideas feel like burdens too heavy to bear. Researchers think it has to do with something called neural plasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself. But even then, it's a shot in the dark. The truth is, for all the science and research out there, the transitions in bipolar disorder still operate under a cloak of mystery, leaving both sufferers and scientists grappling with the unpredictability. So what's it like living in this mental chaos every single day? Imagine waking up and not knowing who you're going to be today. Maybe you're the fearless, unstoppable version of yourself who can conquer anything. Or maybe you're the version who can't even get out of bed. Relationships? Forget it. Trying to explain to a friend or partner why you were full of energy yesterday but can't even muster the strength to talk today, it's not something most people can grasp. And work? How do you hold down a job when your mood might shift unpredictably from being overly ambitious to completely disinterested? People with bipolar disorder aren't lazy or unreliable. They're fighting an invisible war every single day, trying to hold on to some semblance of normalcy. The truth is, society isn't built for people whose minds operate this way. And until we accept that, those suffering are left to fend for themselves, often misunderstood and isolated. Now, here's where things get even darker. Bipolar disorder isn't just about mood swings. It's about survival. More than 30% of people with bipolar disorder attempt suicide, and around 20% of them will succeed. These numbers are staggering. They aren't just statistics, they're reminders that bipolar disorder is as deadly as it is misunderstood. And it's not just the depressive episodes that push people to the edge, it's the mixed states where mania and depression collide, creating a cocktail of impulsivity, rage, and despair. Imagine being filled with energy but not knowing where to direct it, all while a storm of hopelessness rages inside your head. That's where things get fatal fast. And if bipolar disorder wasn't complex enough on its own, it usually doesn't come alone. Like some kind of terrible party guest, it often brings along friends, anxiety, substance abuse, ADHD, and personality disorders. This comorbidity, as it's called, makes treating bipolar disorder a maddening game of whack-a-mole. You treat one symptom, and another one pops up. Someone could be on medications to stabilize their mood, but still grapple with crippling anxiety or drug dependency. It's like trying to untangle a ball of knots, except every time you pull on one thread, the others tighten. These co-occurring disorders don't just complicate treatment, they also worsen the prognosis, making recovery even more elusive. This brings us to one of the most frustrating parts of bipolar disorder: misdiagnosis. It's shockingly common for people with bipolar disorder to go years, even decades, without the right diagnosis. Why? Because the symptoms overlap with so many other mental health conditions: depression, anxiety, ADHD. It's like trying to see a clear image through a foggy lens. Worse still, many people are misdiagnosed with major depression because their depressive episodes are so long and intense. The manic phases are either ignored or mistaken for high-functioning behavior. You can't fix what you don't recognize, and that's the tragedy. People are often left battling an unseen enemy, only to be given the wrong weapons. But let's say you finally get the right diagnosis. Now what? Welcome to the delicate balancing act of medication. Lithium, anticonvulsants, antipsychotics, they're the holy trinity of mood stabilizers. But here's the catch: none of them are perfect, and the side effects can be brutal. Lithium, for instance, is one of the most effective treatments for bipolar disorder, but over time, it can damage your kidneys and thyroid. Valproate might help control mania, but it's dangerous for women of childbearing age. So you've got people playing chemical roulette with their bodies, trying to figure out which combination of meds keeps them balanced without destroying their physical health. It's not just about treating symptoms, it's about survival. Every pill is a gamble, and every day is a roll of the dice. Medication alone won't save you from bipolar disorder. Sure, it keeps the wild mood swings in check sometimes, but this isn't a cut and dried pop a pill, feel better situation. Enter psychotherapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, family focused therapy, FFT, and psychoeducation are crucial tools in the bipolar toolkit. Why? Because meds might dull the edges of mania and depression, but they don't teach you how to navigate life's chaos. Therapy is where people learn to recognize the early signs of an episode, manage the fallout, and rebuild their lives from the wreckage. Think of it like this. If meds are the life jacket keeping you from drowning, therapy is the boat teaching you how to row to shore. Without both, you're just drifting, waiting for the next storm to hit. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Antidepressants. The savior of depression, right? Not so fast. When it comes to bipolar disorder, these little pills are playing with fire. You might think that giving someone with bipolar depression an antidepressant would lift them out of their hopelessness. But often it does the opposite. It triggers mania. And when you add mania to the mix, you're basically pouring gasoline on a wildfire. This is why doctors are so cautious when prescribing antidepressants to someone with bipolar disorder. They know that instead of leveling out the mood, antidepressants can throw the whole brain into a dangerous spin. It's a tightrope walk between keeping the depression at bay and not tipping the patient into a manic episode that could unravel everything. And when all else fails, when the meds aren't working, when the therapy doesn't seem to touch the darkness or calm the storm, there's a last resort that most of you humans would never think of. Electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. Yeah, I know, electroshock. It sounds brutal, medieval even. But here's the twist. ECT is one of the most effective treatments for severe bipolar disorder, particularly when psychosis or catatonia is in play. Picture this. Small, controlled electrical currents are passed through the brain, triggering a brief seizure. It sounds barbaric, but in reality, it's an extremely targeted, controlled process that can pull someone out of the depths of a manic or depressive episode when nothing else works. The problem is no one talks about it. The stigma of shock therapy from horror films and outdated mental institutions has left a sour taste, but for some, ECT is the last flicker of hope. But here's the thing about bipolar disorder that too many of you humans forget. It doesn't mean the end of a life worth living. Far from it. There are people out there, some you might even know, who are living successful, fulfilling lives despite being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Carrie Fisher, one of the boldest voices on the subject, talked openly about her bipolar disorder, even calling it her superpower. She was the embodiment of someone who didn't just survive with bipolar disorder, but thrived. Stephen Fry, another brilliant mind, has done the same, turning his struggle into a source of strength and education for others. These aren't cautionary tales. They're reminders that bipolar disorder, while brutal and often unrelenting, isn't a death sentence. It's a battle, yes, but one that can be fought with the right weapons. But what about the children? Bipolar disorder doesn't just show up in adulthood. It can strike early, in adolescence, or even childhood. And let me tell you, it's a whole different beast when it starts young. In kids, bipolar disorder looks more like rage, irritability, and extreme mood swings, making it harder to diagnose. And here's where things get dicey. A lot of kids with bipolar are misdiagnosed with ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder, leading to years of improper treatment. Imagine growing up not understanding why you feel the way you do, why you're lashing out, or why the world feels like it's crashing down around you when you're only 12. And the treatment? It's a tricky balance of medications that can affect a developing brain, combined with therapy that needs to help these kids navigate a world that already doesn't understand them. Let's go even further. Bipolar disorder has a strange relationship with creativity, one that you humans romanticize to a fault. There's this dangerous idea that bipolar disorder makes people more creative, more in tune with some mystical artistic force. Look, it's true that some people with bipolar disorder have bursts of creativity during manic episodes. Think of Van Gogh, for example. But that's just part of the story. While mania can make someone hyperproductive, it's also destructive. People churn out brilliant work, but it comes at a cost. Relationships ruined, financial ruin, or even psychotic breaks. And when the mania ends, that creativity often dries up, leaving the artist trapped in a depressive hell. So yeah, there's a link, but it's not the kind of creative genius you should wish for. It's a double-edged sword, one that cuts deep, and not always in a way that can be controlled. Now let's zoom out for a moment. The burden of bipolar disorder isn't just on the individuals who suffer from it, it's on society as a whole. Bipolar disorder is one of the leading causes of disability worldwide. Think about that. One mental health condition is costing societies billions in lost productivity, healthcare costs, and the emotional toll it takes on families and caregivers. It's not just a personal tragedy, it's an economic one. People with bipolar disorder often find themselves unable to work, not because they don't want to, but because the cycles of mania and depression make it impossible to maintain a stable job. And even when they are working, it's a struggle. The social costs are even higher: broken relationships, strained families, and a healthcare system that's often ill-equipped to deal with the complexity of the disorder. This isn't just an individual fight, it's a collective one. Let's not sugarcoat it. Managing bipolar disorder is a daily battle. Some days you're winning, some days you're pinned down by invisible forces. But here's the twist. Early intervention makes all the difference. The sooner someone is diagnosed and starts treatment, the better their prognosis. It's like getting ahead of an avalanche. You can't stop it, but maybe you can steer clear of the worst destruction. The tricky part? Most people with bipolar disorder go years without a proper diagnosis. They're often misdiagnosed as having major depression, anxiety, or even ADHD. And while they're chasing down the wrong solutions, the disorder is tightening its grip. You humans are brilliant at building technology to catch the smallest changes in your stock market or your weather patterns. Why not create better systems to catch these mental health issues before they spiral out of control? Now let's face another hard truth. The most dangerous form of bipolar disorder is the rapid cycling subtype. This one is the beast that never sleeps. People with rapid cycling bipolar disorder don't get months of mania followed by months of depression. No, they get 4 or more mood episodes within a single year, sometimes switching between mania and depression in the span of days. It's like being caught in a blender with no off switch. Rapid cyclers are the hardest to treat, the most difficult to stabilize, and often the most at risk for suicide or self-harm. The rapid shifts make it feel impossible to predict what's coming next, and it makes the standard treatment methods less effective. It's as if the brain's internal clock is broken, leaving the person trapped in an unpredictable storm of their own mind. So how do you even begin to stabilize this chaos? Medications are the first line of defense, but like I said before, they aren't perfect. Lithium, for instance, is the gold standard, famed for its ability to level out the wild highs and lows of bipolar disorder. But here's the kicker. More than half of people who start lithium treatment will eventually stop taking it. Why? Side effects: weight gain, kidney damage, and a whole host of other unpleasant realities make it hard to stick with the program. It's a grim trade-off. Protect your mind, but sacrifice your body. For others, anticonvulsants like valproate or lamotrigine are more tolerable, but they don't work for everyone. And then there are antipsychotics, quetiapine, olanzapine, aripiprazole, which can be lifesavers for some and nightmares for others. It's a constant balancing act, adjusting meds like you're tuning an unstable radio signal. And then there's compliance. What a cruel word, right? It sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, but it's a very real problem in the world of bipolar disorder. Medications only work if you take them, but the roller coaster of emotions and the fog of depression can make it feel like those pills are an enemy. People stop taking their meds for all sorts of reasons: side effects, denial, or even the seductive pull of mania. When you're manic, you feel alive, invincible. Who wouldn't want to hold on to that? The problem is, without medication, mania quickly spins out of control, and the crash that follows is even more devastating. But try telling that to someone riding high on the crest of a manic episode. You humans don't like being told what to do, especially by little pills that seem to drain away all your brilliance. Then there's the mental toll, the cognitive dysfunction that comes with bipolar disorder. You see, it's not just about moods. People with bipolar disorder often experience cognitive issues, like trouble with memory, concentration, and decision-making. It's like walking through a fog with your mind not quite firing on all cylinders. The highs and lows take a toll, leaving a scar on the brain's ability to process information. Even when someone is in remission, when they aren't actively experiencing mania or depression, they're still battling this cognitive decline. It affects their ability to hold down a job, keep up with relationships, and manage day-to-day life. This is what makes bipolar disorder so insidious. Even when you're better, you're never fully out of the woods. And here's where the rubber meets the road. Recovery from bipolar disorder isn't linear. It's not a smooth upward trajectory. People can go months, even years, without a major episode, only to have the rug pulled out from under them by a relapse. The triggers can be anything: stress, lack of sleep, even the change of seasons. It's like living on a knife's edge, always waiting for the next fall. But there's something remarkable about those who fight this battle: resilience. The sheer determination to rebuild after every breakdown, to hold on to hope in the face of relentless chaos. That's the true strength of those with bipolar disorder. It's not about avoiding the crash, it's about surviving it and having the will to climb out of the wreckage again and again. Let's not kid ourselves. Suicide isn't just a risk for people with bipolar disorder, it's a looming shadow that hovers over them. The statistics are brutal. Nearly half of those with bipolar disorder will attempt suicide at some point in their lives. It's not just about depression, mania plays a role too. The impulsivity, the grandiosity, the feeling of being invincible can lead someone to take fatal risks. But it's in those dark, quiet moments of despair where the real danger lies. The lows are so deep, so all-consuming, that death seems like the only escape. It's not a cry for attention. It's a final surrender to a battle they feel they can't win. And that's why understanding, treatment, and support aren't just important, they're life-saving. So here we are, staring down the abyss that is suicide. And it's not just a side effect of bipolar disorder, it's the terrifying endgame for too many. Nearly 20% of people with bipolar disorder will die by their own hand. Let that sink in. Think of all the brilliant minds, the creative spirits, the everyday people lost because the disorder was just too much. The thing is, it's not always the depression that kills. Sometimes it's the manic highs, where judgment is so impaired that a person might take reckless risks, believing they're untouchable. Or maybe it's the impulsivity that comes with a mixed episode, a chaotic collision of mania and depression, where there's just enough energy to act on the darkest thoughts. This isn't just tragic, it's preventable, but only if society wakes up to the reality of bipolar disorder's lethal potential. Now, what happens when the world doesn't wake up? What happens when society doesn't step in, when healthcare systems fail, when family and friends can't understand what their loved ones are going through? That's where the true economic and social costs come into play. Bipolar disorder isn't just a personal tragedy, it's a global one. We're talking billions in lost productivity, healthcare costs, disability payments, and the financial strain it places on families. And let's not forget the emotional toll on caregivers, partners, and children. The ripple effects are enormous. One person's untreated disorder becomes an entire family's crisis, and soon enough, it stretches into the workplace, into social systems, and even the economy. The price of not treating bipolar disorder early and effectively isn't just personal, it's a societal catastrophe. But it's not all darkness and doom. For all the chaos that bipolar disorder brings, there is also hope. Treatment can work. People can find stability. It's not about curing the disorder, that's not possible yet, but it's about managing it, learning how to live alongside it without letting it run the show. And that's where therapy, medication, and support systems come in. The people who manage to hold their lives together while juggling the extremes of bipolar disorder, they're warriors. They've learned how to navigate a world that wasn't built for them, all while carrying the weight of a mind that could betray them at any moment. But with the right tools, with the right community, people can live full, vibrant lives, even with this disorder lurking in the background. You see, bipolar disorder isn't just about surviving, it's about finding a way to thrive in spite of it. Let's talk about resilience, because that's what it takes to live with this disorder. Every time someone with bipolar disorder gets knocked down by an episode, they're faced with a choice: give in or get back up. And let me tell you, the ones who get back up, they're the real heroes. They've learned to recognize their triggers, to reach out for help when they need it, to stick to their treatment even when it feels like the meds are dulling their brilliance. And that's the key: knowing when to fight back and knowing when to lean on the people around them. Because no one fights this alone. Bipolar disorder is a battle, but it's one that can be fought. It's not a death sentence. It's not the end of the road. It's just a different path, a harder one, sure, but still a path. But where do we go from here? How do we as a society do better? First, we need to talk about it. Bipolar disorder, mental illness in general, it's still too taboo. People are scared to admit they're struggling, and when they do, they're met with misunderstanding, even judgment. That has to change. Education is the first step. Schools, workplaces, healthcare providers, everyone needs to know what bipolar disorder is, what it looks like, and how to help. And not just in a vague, be kind kind of way, but in a real, practical, step-by-step approach. Spotting the signs early, offering support, making sure people get the right treatment before they spiral out of control, that's where the focus needs to be. We don't need more platitudes about mental health awareness. We need action. And let's not forget, the stigma around bipolar disorder isn't just social, it's in the healthcare system too. How many doctors misdiagnose bipolar disorder as depression or anxiety? How many psychiatrists are too quick to throw antidepressants into the mix without considering the consequences? This is where education needs to happen at the highest levels. Healthcare professionals need to understand that bipolar disorder is a complex beast, and treating it is an art as much as a science. It's about finding the right balance of medication, therapy, and lifestyle changes. And it's about doing it early, before the disorder has time to destroy someone's life. Early intervention is key, but that only happens if doctors know what they're looking for and take the time to listen to their patients. In the end, bipolar disorder is a story of survival. It's about finding light in the darkest corners of the mind, about holding on when everything inside you is telling you to let go. The people who live with this disorder, they are some of the strongest humans out there. They know what it's like to lose control, to feel the highs that make them believe they're unstoppable, only to crash into the lows that make them feel invisible. And yet they keep going, because that's what survival is. It's moving forward, even when the road ahead is impossible to see. So if you're watching this, if you're living with bipolar disorder or know someone who is, know this: there is hope. There is help. And while the fight is hard, you are not alone in it. Thank you for sticking with me through this dive into the depths of bipolar disorder. This isn't a simple story, and it's far from over, but I hope you leave with a deeper understanding of what it means to live with this condition. If this video spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going, because that's where real change begins. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more deep dives into the human mind.